evening. We will call to order the regular Board of Education meeting of Monday, February 10th, 2025. Emily, will you take roll call, please?
Tracy,
Here.
Mark,
Here.
Eric,
Here.
Aaron,
Here.
Ann.
Here. I will verify we do have quorum. Will you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Aaron, would you read our mission statement, please?
My pleasure. Working together to ensure high levels of learning for all.
Thank you. Emily, was public notice of this meeting given?
Public notice was given to the requesting news media. The agenda was posted in district buildings and on the district website.
Thank you. Are there any revisions to tonight's agenda?
There are none.
Motion to approve the agenda as published.
Motion by Aaron, seconded by Eric to approve tonight's agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Tonight's agenda is approved as published. We do not have any requests tonight for public input on the published agenda items. So we will move to some pretty fantastic recognitions tonight, and we have some pretty amazing young women joining us tonight from our dance team. I'll let Charlie do the introduction.
Sure, I'll just give a quick intro. I'd like to welcome a couple members of our dance team, and last couple weekends ago, 2 top 5 finishes, so fantastic representation of Onalaska and Onalaska High School, and also some individual accomplishments and participation as well. But I'll hand it over to Coach Geary to kind of give us the laydown of how that went and some other highlights throughout the season.
Did I press this or? It's up. Okay. Hi, I just wanted to thank you all for having us here. We had state 2 weeks ago, and we placed top 5 in both pom and jazz. Something we're very proud of. We've had a lot of struggles this season, just like any team does, but I think state week is when it all really pulls together, and once again they did that and achieved all of their goals. So we're very proud of them. Do you want to talk, Megan, about you guys' individual stuff?
I feel like just this year was a really special team for us because being our last year, we just wanted to be really memorable and drama free and everything like that. And I feel like the team this year right away just really bonded together well, and that stayed with us the entire year, and it was so easy for us to just get things done. And yeah, it was just everyone was a family, and we could work so hard, and we accomplished so many of the goals that we wanted to accomplish. So
dance team is such a beautiful sport. Not only do we get to share the same passion as a team, we all love to dance, but also with all the districts in the community. We don't compete against any of our usual rivals, you could say, Aquinas, Holman, West Salem. They're all in different divisions, so all of us really just come together and we're able to all support each other, and it's really just amazing. And I'm very, very thankful for the team we had this year as well. And we did amazing things this season, some things that have never happened in Megan and I's 4 years on dance team. So, yeah.
Well, we appreciate you coming. You guys make this a regular occurrence, so that speaks pretty highly of the culture that you Coach, have developed on the team. And we do hear this same thing, that you are a family, that you all work together, you all support each other. I love the added, and you're supporting what would typically be on arrival. So that also speaks pretty highly of your character, and so we appreciate you coming here and letting us congratulate you in person. Of course, many of us probably saw on the news and social media, but it's even better to be able to look you in the eye and tell you both congratulations. Good luck as you graduate here from Onalaska, but thank you for sharing your passion with us for all of these years. It's greatly appreciated. All right, we have another staff recognition. Jack Hagstrom, welcome. And you have received your master's degree. So, do you want to just give us some, what was your master's degree in? Where did you go?
Yeah, sure. So thank you all for letting me come and kind of spew a little bit about this. A few years ago, I was in quite a crossroad in life of trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and my wife was 7 months pregnant. We were trying to figure out if we wanted to stay in the area, and I was able to have a conversation with an individual who recommended going back to school and getting my post-batch in education through Viterbo University. So I went out on an absolute, limb and enrolled, and while it was challenging, it was a wonderful and humbling experience. And during my time there, they were able to use some of my previous credits and whatnot and move me into a master's program in the CrossCat special education that Viterbo University created. It's the Masters of Teaching in cross-categorical. And fortunately, I was able to be the first graduate of the program history. And it was huge. It was something that myself and my family were very proud of. And, I couldn't have done it without the support from not only my family, but from Jana, Ben, and the district that went out on a limb and, took a chance on me. And, now it's just proving to you guys that I'm a master. So it's been a really, really awesome experience, and I can't wait to use some of that knowledge towards our future in the Onalaska area.
That's, it's amazing. So if I followed that right, you started school when then you eventually had a baby.
Yeah, about a month and a half later.
Okay, so that's a big learning curve
Yeah.
too, as most of us know. So you had a lot going on. So impressive. Congratulations on
Thank
your
you.
graduation.
I appreciate that.
And thank you. Thank you for doing that. Your passion is very clear for what you do. There is a significant need for special education teachers, which I'm sure you're very well aware of. And especially those with the passion level that you have shown, and your willingness to go back and do that is really phenomenal. So
I appreciate that. Thank
we
you.
appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for choosing us to share that journey with and share your passion with our students at the middle school. It's really remarkable. So we also appreciate you allowing us to come congratulate you in person tonight.
Yeah.
You are one of 71% now of our staff which have their master's degree, which I think we need to brag about, because that really speaks to the continuous improvement and lifelong learners that we have here in Onalaska. So thank you for becoming part of that club
Yeah.
as well.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Yes, we do have a certificate for you. All right, and then we have one of our own to congratulate tonight. I thought about taking it off, but no. I think it's important that we, as we've talked about, lifelong learners and continuous improvement, you, in your time here on the board, stepped into that role, stepped into the commitment of what we do, being a team player, stepping up into leadership very quickly. So We appreciate you, the WASB appreciates the extra mile that folks do, and you have achieved level 1 for the Wisconsin Association of School Boards certificate, and a little bling for you. Thank you. We appreciate you very much, and so does the state of Wisconsin. So,
Am I supposed to say something?
if you'd like to, please do.
Well, this all aside, like, this is, like, being here at this table with all of you, right, is an honor. It's like a passion project for me, like, to be part of the community in this way. So, I think it's all possible because of all of you sitting here. So, thank you very much for everything you do. It makes it really enjoyable to be sitting here with you. So.
All right. We'll jump into our student rep and administrator reports. Leah, we'll go back to you.
So as you heard, dance team had a pretty great success at state, as well as ski and snowboard at, which will be at Mount Lacrosse. But 8 athletes qualified for state for Onalaska High School ski and snowboard, so that's very, very impressive. But also, I'd like to acknowledge both the dance team and the football team on them serving the community and giving back to the community. With dance team, they hosted the kids clinic at the high school where they invited elementary school students and even middle school students to come and learn dances with us dance team girls, and we had so much fun. We're going to have a performance at the basketball game on Friday, and it's just so much fun seeing all the kids just dancing around with their friends. I remember doing it when I was little, but it's such a great way to give back to the community and just feel amazing, and it's just really nice. And I talked to some of my friends on the football team. They recently had their tailgate party. Yeah. With some of the disabled community held at the high school, and I heard that what they do is they basically play games and have activities with this community, and they also love the feeling of giving back to the community and just seeing all the happiness on all the kids' faces and adults' faces. It's just a great thing for athletes to do. It makes the athletes feel great, and it makes the community feel even better. So, yeah.
Thank you. Jared, any more from the high school?
Only thing I would add is that the last 2 weeks we've been doing a lot of video work in classrooms in preparation for next Monday's professional development day, but focusing on each team specific focus that they chose as a group back in fall. So a really neat example, for example, like our music team is focusing on how they give feedback during rehearsal to have the most meaningful impact on performance. And it's really neat being in a classroom, getting the video, and then pulling it together for the teams. But the other cool thing is, when you pull a kid into the hall and say, what makes, how Miss Thompson, Mr. Moses, whoever, what makes their feedback most impactful? It's amazing how students always have the answers. Like, this is what makes it best. This is what takes us away from our focus. It's a great example for us to be able to hear from kids and make improvements based on that. And it's been well received by staff because, again, it's the area of focus that they've selected as a team. It's been very powerful this year.
Fantastic. Go. Jana, middle school.
I have to wake up my notes again, sorry. We had this past week, we had our vertical meetings, and we're looking at making continual progress in our topper times. Ben went over to high school to observe the drafting system that they're doing for their resource as we are navigating a potential schedule shift at the middle school, wanting to make use of our topper times and resource times in order to better serve students in either enrichment or intervention opportunities. Our RISE team, which is our behavior intervention team, is meeting about once a month, and then a smaller group of a smaller group out of that meeting is going to continue to work on the staff manage the staff manage and office manage behavior clarity, just to make sure that we're continually refining that system. And then also our recognition system for positive behaviors. And something that we're excited about is Friday's our third annual Winter Wellness Day, where we head out into the community. This year we added jump starts where we go bowling at Playmore, because they have the 16, like they have a lot of lanes, so we can take a big group of students there. We're going to the Omni Center for ice skating, and we're going to Jump Start. And then when the students are back at school, we have enrichment opportunities all focused on mental, physical, emotional wellness. We've continually made it better each year, added a couple more things to just highlight the various activities that we have in the community that can promote wellness.
Awesome, thank you. And Abby?
Yep. So with the winter assessment window just closing, we recently had math data review meetings at each of our buildings with Lori Peterson, our math coach, and then also some others joined, but just found lots to celebrate, and also did some planning around tiered interventions, specifically Delta Math, which we're implementing at our buildings. This week is Bus Driver Appreciation Week, so we have lots of kids writing sweet notes to the bus drivers for getting them to and from school safely and then on field trips and such. 100th Day is also right around this time. There's been some discussion around which day it actually is with the whole day and everything, but we are celebrating 100th Day with, you know, kids doing a lot of activities around counting and such. Also Friday is Friendship Day, and so at each of our buildings we have something special. Northern Hills has a fancy lunch and then kindness activities in the classroom. At Perch, our 5th grade leaders are sharing a kindness activity in each classroom, and then at Eagle Bluff, they also have friendship and kindness activities happening with notes of affirmation and gratitude being spread throughout the building. Yep, so lots of fun with that, but then also looking forward to this Friday's dance. As Leah said, the dance clinic students, joining them for halftime at the basketball game to show off their moves.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you, as always. Lots and lots of stuff going on. SEL focus is fantastic to hear, and then all the academics and your growth as teams is really fantastic to hear. So thank you all for your continued commitment. It's a tough time of year. The month of January seems to be several months long, but you survive, so thank you. All right, we have some building updates tonight, both middle and high school. High school first.
Most of the work in the last week and the work in the next weeks to come is on the east side of the addition along the stadium. The picture you're looking at right now is finishing the masonry work on the exterior of the building in the current, the area that will be the tech ed area. And if we scroll down, you'll see the demolition occurring in the existing technical education area. I did take video of this back about a month ago, just so we could all remember what it looked like before the renovations occurred. Again, this is going to be, I think, the most exciting change to see because of where it was to where it will be. If we keep going down, seeing more of the work that's being done demolition-wise within that existing tech ed area. And next. The roofing that's been going on in the last week now. The joists were set 2 weeks ago, and then the roofing company has been in last week and this week, and particularly tying into the existing roofing area, the existing roof to the new roof on the east addition. That new east addition is higher, like you can see in the picture, so they've had to do some extra measures to make sure that the snow load will be adequate, as well as for leaks where the two roofs come together. And more examples of the roofing. They're also focusing on putting the actual brick over the concrete block on the exterior of the PE storage along the Circle Drive area on the southwest corner of the building.
That's fantastic. Middle school.
Just got some. Oh, are we gonna watch the video first? Okay.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Onalaska Middle School for another community update. We've got a lot of exciting stuff going on inside the project, so let's go on inside and take a look. All right, we're here on segment F and H, the new classroom edition. You can kind of see where the old is marrying up to the new, or the former edition is marrying up to the new edition. Here this past month, we've been working on CMU bearing walls here on segment F and H. And also we got some window blocking going. Obviously, we've been battling the weather a little bit with the cold snaps, but we're getting some warmer weather in here and able to make a lot of progress. We're now in under the overhang at segment F, and right now it's temp enclosed, obviously for winter, but eventually this will just be an open overhang, a waiting area, and a bike storage area for students. Now we're walking through first level of segment F, the classroom pod area. As you can see, we have a lot of MEP overhead rough-ins going on, so just making progress down here on the first level of segment F as the second level bearing walls get laid. All right, we're on the second level of segment F and H, the classroom edition. As you can see, we have our exterior bearing walls going up currently, and then we're also beginning interior bearing walls as well. Just giving you another shot here on the second level, segment H of the masonry bearing walls going up. Obviously, we're trying to utilize the warm weather that we're experiencing here, so thankful for that. Moving on into segment F, right now we're walking into what will be the future sensory area portion of the school. This is an area that used to be the former administrative area, and an area that we've moved ahead on in schedule, doing demo and getting build back in progress. Technically now we're in segment E of the building, but just giving you a shot of some underground MEP work that we're having done currently. Again, this is in the former administrative area that we took over here recently, completed demolition, and then got underground MEP work going, and then beginning with build back here shortly. With completion of Gym 194, the new gym addition, we've actually taken over the existing Gym 177, which will be the future Boys and Girls Club gym. As you can see, we're just getting going with demolition in here, taking out the old bleachers, getting the old equipment taken down, and then we're going to be starting on painting and build back here in the near future. Moving on to segment A, we're walking down corridor 170. This is down in the band and multi-purpose wing. So as we're walking up here, you can see the alcove for the musical instrument case work. That's going to be getting delivered here in the coming weeks. And as we move into what is going to be the future band area, you can see we're doing overhead priming for paint. So looking forward to getting this area completed and turned over to the district here in the near future. All right, so that'll wrap up our update for this month here at the Onalaska Middle School. We appreciate you guys tuning in to see the progress. Obviously, a lot of things going on throughout the building and different stages of construction. Overall, we're excited to be here. We're enjoying bringing this awesome project to the Onalaska community. And as always, we appreciate the partnership with our subcontractors, Vantage Architects, the Onalaska School District, and the community at large for your patience as we get through this construction project. We look forward to bringing you more updates here in the future. Stay tuned. Thank you.
So Jared had a lot of pictures of roofs. I hope to have that the next time we meet as well. Lots of pictures of a roof on our new 8th grade classrooms up top there on the second floor, as you saw. So that's what this first picture is. It'll be 8th grade on the top, and on the bottom will be resource, Spanish, French, algebra, all the miscellaneous classrooms. There's an aerial view as well. Again, that's a little outdated. They're very close to starting to putting the roof on. So again, hopefully in the next 2 weeks we'll have a roof, and then you can see some of the work here on the inside. He kept mentioning MEP, which I believe stands for like mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. All the stuff that is the behind the scenes part of a building. This picture is even further along than what he showed in the video in terms of remodeling the old gymnasium. And so you can see the floor is quickly disappearing, the old floor, I should say. And then he talked about in the old administrative area that has been blocked off now for a while, they're continuing to do the work in there, some prep work before they rebuild it back up, digging in there. It wasn't in the video, but you can see clearly in this picture, the new casework for all of our instrument storage is going in the last few days. It's just beautiful woodwork. It's very nice, lots of different sizes. I'm especially personally grateful for this casework because my 6th grader decided to just switch from trumpet to tuba. And so I don't have to take that home because they can live right there. So that's great. A little personal win. Above and beyond that, again, the new band room is our next big milestone, probably about 3 weeks away or so. And while we're talking about that, it just as a constant, reminder and shout out to just the flexibility that our staff have. So we have 4 music teachers between band, orchestra, choir, and general music. And right now we have 3 spaces, and they are going to temporarily be going down to sharing 2, to eventually be up to having 4 spaces. And so it's just another example of the flexibility and adaptability that our fantastic staff have, as well as how amazing this project will be when it's all said and done. So just a quick little shout out to the music team there.
Awesome. Thank you, and thank you again for your continued, both buildings working amidst all of that. Construction has been a challenge without complaint. So thank you. Thank you to both buildings for that. All right, we tonight, Fame, Lori, and the building principals are gonna report on progress on our strategic plan for Pillar 1. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, Fame.
So our Pillar 1 report out, the pillar being student engagement, growth, and achievement. Those 2 5-year objectives that we're looking at are integrating essential academic, social, emotional learning to ensure achievement for all and amplify student belonging and engagement. So the primary focus of our strategic plan report outs is about finding time to pause and reflect, asking ourselves the questions, what are we learning and how are we adjusting where necessary? Throughout this Pillar 1, we look at many different measures, STAR assessments, now Ames Web Plus. We look at passing grade percentages, absenteeism data, and other metrics because they are the indicators that we've honed in on as predictors of how students are progressing through a variety of ways across an entire school year. So the first part of our Pillar 1 report out is very much tied to understanding how students are progressing when we look at grade level learning and academic standards, which leads eventually to increased proficiency on state assessments and are connected to then our strategic plan scorecard, which is also updated and included as an attachment to this portion of the evening. So I'll start here and just to orient ourselves with, we readjusted this a little bit. We tried to streamline the report out by connecting the annual goal to the data that's connected to it. So you'll see always the annual goal on top, and then where there's data, you'll see that directly underneath. So our first annual goal has been revised because the 3rd grade transitioned to a new assessment this year because that was something that Act 20 required of us. So now 4th through 8th grade students will continue taking STAR reading, and the goal has been revised to reflect that and the beginning percentage adjusted as well. So this revised goal, STAR reading, will predict that at least 55% of 4th through 8th grade students will achieve proficiency, which is meeting or advanced on the forward ELA, and that score at the end of last year, the predictor was 48%. So you can see there that we started in fall with 35% of our students. We've now climbed to 43%. You can see where we are on our way to 55% at the end of the year when we look at all 4th through 8th grade students on STAR reading. Our next annual goal is also revised because we transitioned to the new assessment and included 3rd grade in that. So our new goal is decreasing by at least 5% the percentage of kindergarten through 3rd grade students who are scoring at the 25th percentile or below using Ames Web Plus as a measure, and This is the first time we've ever given this assessment. Having a new assessment roll out in the middle of the year has its challenges. So this is very much a baseline for us, like it's the beginning point. I think it's important to note that it's the first time that we've assessed all of our K through third grade students with a more granular timed assessment like Ames Web Plus. And we've noticed that the information gathered is more efficiently informing our instructional practices. Previously, our system would really dive deeply into these types of assessments for students who are below the 10th percentile to provide Tier 3 instruction. So Tier 1 is universal, all students receive it. Tier 2 is support in Tier 1. And then Tier 3 is helping students close gaps for skills that they would have learned a year or more before that year. So when we were looking at the 10th percentile or below students, we would be intervening. We would progress monitor weekly to gauge effectiveness of interventions. So what's kind of cool about how we're responding to Act 20 is that we're still doing that for the bottom 10th percentile, and now we're doing that for our 11th through 24th percentile students as well. So we've built personal reading plans for every single, all 39% of students. We know that it's having an impact because we are progress monitoring every single one of those 39% of students. And so it's, I think we know that it's going to make a difference. We know that it's going to have a positive impact because all of our students are continuing to receive targeted support that we're monitoring on a regular basis. Another really kind of cool benefit so far is the system that we've all worked to create in response to Act 20 is that we've always been collaborative, and this continues to allow us to be very intentionally collaborative about the kinds of support that students need. And then also, like I sat in a couple of meetings this last week where teachers are kind of like hungry for progress and wanting to progress monitor students who are in the 61% because they're sometimes grouped with students who are receiving support. And I just I think that underscores our continuous the way we embrace continuous improvement in our district. So that's been pretty, Act 20, nobody really knew what to expect, and then as it's rolled out, there have been some bumps, but I think the way we've approached it has been very collaborative, kind of stepped through it. We continue to survey teachers and teams. Our principals are, on the ground, taking the lead on everything. Our interventionists have been incredible, and it's just been really amazing to see everybody coming together for the best interests of all students, which we always do. And then really leaning into Act 20 as something that is going to benefit our students incredibly over time. I know it will. And then our final annual goal for ELA is maintaining at least a 95% passing rate for all 9th through 11th grade students in all of their their core English courses. And you can see we're on track to continue that maintenance goal over time. So when we look at action steps, I wanted to first review the colors just to make sure we all kind of are calibrated together. The green is that we've made expected progress on the action steps. Maybe we've achieved the goal, or there's growth on progress monitoring toward achieving the goal. If our action step is yellow, it's slower than anticipated progress, but we're close to achieving the goal or growth on progress monitoring. And if it's red, there's no to limited progress. So just kind of keeping that in the forefront. So when we look at action steps for the first semester, we completed 3 of them. One of them we lost our literacy instructional coach early in the year. We have replaced that position with somebody who's in part-time capacity. So we haven't been able to do as much of the instructional coaching as we originally wanted. And we are looking at those steps, thinking about the data that we just looked at, right? The percentages, the Ames Web Plus district, and then the STAR reading, that these action steps have had a positive impact. Then when we look to semester 2, we're beginning that next ELA pilot in grades K-8. We're monitoring very closely those personal reading plans at each building, assessing student growth. We're going to again convene our Act 20 steering committee to provide feedback for those spring assessments and all of the work that goes into going back to those personal reading plans and updating them and revising them. And then we are creating instructional strategies for practicing those specific reading skills, and then also meeting with grade level teams to support instruction. So those are as we look to semester 2. And I want to pause maybe after this is the ELA portion and see if there are any questions before I scoot to the next slide.
So Act 20 requires you will do a spring assessment with the same Ames Web.
Yep. Yep.
And the ELA pilot we've been talking about for a while. We did a full semester with the Amplify, and then you'll do a full semester with the Arts and Letters. And then the intent is at the end of the year to choose one of those two.
Yes. Yes, and at the middle school, in addition to arts and letters, we're piloting my perspectives as well. So kind of doing about a quarter of each to get a good lay of the land for like possible programs to adopt. We will make a decision at the end of the year.
I guess just more of that's a lot to do in ELA. The piloting, kudos to those teachers who are doing that. But also just the rollout of Act 20 is a huge undertaking. The regulations behind that too.
Oh, absolutely.
Just thank you for that. I know that's been a lot. And to continue to stay on target with this stuff is impressive. So thank you.
Thank you for mentioning that, and it's like working with our teachers who are stepping through this year, and our interventionists and our building principals, everybody. It is a feat. It is. Okay. Our next annual goal is around the state identified target group, which the state takes the bottom, so different than the 25th percentile, where like you could have, very few students landing in that category on the Ames Web Plus. We will eventually have very few students landing in that category. The state grabs the bottom 25% of students. So just goes from the bottom and grabs 25%, and that becomes your target group based on the performance of the last state assessment. So we thought it was important to keep track of how our state identified target group is doing. In ELA and math, we want them to individually attain a 66 student growth percentile, which is above average growth or higher, using the STAR reading and STAR math as a measure. So just a reminder of like what SGP means. It's a number between 1 and 99 that measures how much a student has learned in a subject over time. It's always comparing a student's performance to all other students, so like millions of students in the normed group that have similar test scores in the past. Okay, and then basically what it means is if you have an SGP of 50, the student's growth is equal or greater to than half of their peers. So 66 equal to or greater than 66% of their peers. Higher student growth percentile means that they're growing at a rate that's faster than their peers, and a lower means it's below average growth. So we know that saying that we want every single target every single student who's in the state identified target group to be growing at the highest level, we know it's ambitious. And, but we knew also that that's the way that you close gaps, is by growing students as above, in an above average fashion. So here we see on the left, above average growth, we have 34% of our target group who are achieving above average growth, 32% who are average, and then 34% who are below average right now, and that's in ELA, 4th through 8th grade students. And then for our target group, for our district in math, we have 35% above average, 36% average, and 29% below average. It's important to note, what was kind of cool about when we gathered the data this year for math is that our goal says for students who are below proficiency. So we actually had some students in math that we had to take out of this equation because they were already meeting proficiency on the last state assessment, and they're in our target group. So as more students become proficient, we're going to have more students in our target group who are already proficient, who will be able to continue to grow. But I think that's kind of a celebration to be able to say, oh, you're in the target group and you're already proficient. So when we look at these, we didn't meet our goal because 100% of our target group students are not growing at the above average rate. And I would like to recognize that both in ELA and math, we have about 70% of our students who are growing in the average or above average category. And when the buildings have their reports, they're going to talk about more about how they're honing their system to meet the needs of our students who are not quite growing at the rate that we're looking for yet. So they'll talk a little bit more about that. Our action steps, we completed our action step for semester 1. We did not meet our goal, but we're moving in the right direction, and that's why our impact is yellow. We've colored that yellow. And then when we look at semester 2, we're really like diving into our tiered system of support for reading and math. That's related to Act 20, but like the math part of it is not, but we've been doing a lot of work in that. And then thinking about the creation of student support plans for students in 5th grade heading to 6th grade, so that when we think about the transition from 3 elementary schools to 1 middle school, that we're consistently communicating the ways that we've supported students throughout elementary school. So that's the second goal, and I'll pause to see if there are any questions before we move on to math.
I just have one question. And I completely respect if you don't know the answer to this, so I apologize in advance. But like with reading, they have the personal reading plans. So with math here, you said refine tiered systems. Well, semester 2 is refine tiered systems of support for reading and math. Do you know if they're kind of using a similar strategy for math then?
So we have problem-solving teams at every one of our buildings, and we give assessments, like we give STAR assessments in math, and we do look very closely at the students who are in the bottom 25th percentile, and particularly students who are in the bottom 10th percentile in math. So we have a similar system. I would say that the thing that we need to refine is our Tier 3 support of math. Right now, we are like at capacity. Think about what we just talked about. Like teachers are doing a lot of we're progress monitoring, we're providing different types of assessments. Our interventionists do provide math interventions. Our teachers provide math interventions and small group work all the time. I think it's that Tier 3 piece that we really need to hone in on, which is kind of what this is referring to. Might not have been super clear. We don't do math plans the way we've done reading plans. However, that might inform some of our next steps that we make in the area of math, though.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Amy mentioned that action step wasn't accomplished here today. Does that adjust the second semester two action step and goal? Is that dependent upon the accomplishment of semester one, or is it independent?
So the action step in semester one, we completed, it's the impact because we didn't have 100% of students. So it's the impact that we would go, we didn't quite get there, and we know that these next two action steps are going to grow students further as we enter that second half of the year.
Because I think if you look at the defined tier system of support, that's will be the key to get us out of this hell. Get all of this, but still get that another refined tiered system so that
And something that we've talked about is we love being able to set an ambitious goal. Remember when we had SEL Sabres and we said we wanted all of our students to be low risk? And then we kind of went back to the table and talked about the fact that we're always going to have students who are going through stuff. And so maybe the way we readjusted our scorecard and then our goal is that we want 100% of students who are in the high risk category for Sabres to be matched with supports. And I think when we talked as a team, we kind of went, maybe that's something that to think about with the target group, that instead of saying that all of the students will be in the 66 student growth percentile, maybe we start to like hone in on specifically the interventions and support, that if a student is in the target group, they're matched with the interventions and supports they need to be able to continue grow in math and ELA. So that's just like a snippet of part of the conversation that we had as an administrative team preparing for this presentation. Any other questions before I move on to math? So for math, we have STAR Math will predict that at least 55% of 3rd through 8th grade students will achieve proficiency on forward math, and we had 47% last year. So we can see the data starting at 20%, growing to 32%, and on the way to 55% for that spring proficiency. So I wanted to, the data is a little bit slow to grow, but remember we just talked about with the student growth percentile? As I was digging, I noted that all 3rd through 8th grade students take STAR Math. And of all of our 3rd through 8th grade students, 42% of them are growing at that 66 or higher, which is a huge celebration. Like that's almost half of all of our population of students who are growing at an above average rate. That's incredible. Like that's worth celebrating. So I wanted to mention that. And then looking at maintaining a 95% passing rate for all 9th through 11th grade students in core math courses. Last year we had 96% who passed. You can see we're on track to continue that this year. Our action steps, hit one, missed the other because we didn't make it quite to the high school. The impact we would say is positive. And then semester 2, we're continuing to provide professional development. So we're working with somebody named Shannon Keebler, and she's going to get to spend one day in each of our elementary schools. She models lessons. She talks about just best math instructional practices. And I think just based on the survey and conversations with teachers, it's been probably some of the best professional math development that we've had, in the way of teachers are going, I'm learning things I can put into place tomorrow. And that's ultimately like, that's a good thing. Like we want that to be the case. We are refining and incorporating tier 2 and tier 3 interventions in grades K-8. That's related to the other action step about refining the systems of support. And then we are conducting math observations in grades 6-8, creating plans that help improve instruction with the help of instructional coaching in collaboration. Ben, I know you're working with Lori to do that, our math coach. So that concludes math, and I'll pause before handing it over to Lori.
So when you have, you know with semester one where you're at and semester two, that's what you're working towards, is it the actual test scores that you're using to determine if you're successful or not, like based on what the overall test scores are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like this is, our goal is looking at using STAR Math as a measure. So that becomes the assessment that we're looking at for 3rd through 8th grade students. Our 1st graders and 2nd graders take it too, but they don't take the state assessment yet in math. And then this is a predictor of how they'll eventually do on the forward. So then the forward, right, informs like our student or our school and district report cards, which is part of our scorecard. So it kind of like, it all kind of feeds together. These are the leading indicator data that we've chosen to keep track of our progress. And then something like the forward or the ACT or the pre-ACT secure, we would call those lagging indicators, because we get those results and we can kind of go, okay, how did we do? But it's hard to use those results to make any actionable changes, which is why we have these, because we can notice, how are we doing? What did we learn? What do we need to adjust? And so that's kind of, I hope you heard that as a theme.
Oh, for sure. I appreciate you clarifying that for me though, because like you said, there's so many different tests going
I
on
know,
there. I just
know.
wanted to understand a little bit better, so I appreciate that.
Yeah. So the 4 levels on the forward, I wrote these down because we talked about this. They changed them starting last year. So this year, meeting and advanced are the proficient or advanced. They used to be called proficient or advanced. And then below basic used to be below basic. Now it's developing. And then they had a basic category, which is now approaching. So I wanted to use language that was a little bit more like growth mindset. Yes.
Yeah, I think my point is they're the top 2 levels.
Yes.
It used to be, we looked at the top 3 levels and wanted to have most of the kids in those areas. Now we're talking about having most of the kids in the top 2 levels, which is also raising the bar. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. Any questions at all? Okay.
Do you want to keep driving?
Sure can.
So these next goals are still under Pillar 1, and it moves more into that student engagement and our SEL goals. So this first slide is addressing that goal of full implementation of an equitable multi-level system of supports to meet 100% of students' social emotional learning needs. So that's our annual goal. This semester, a lot of our action steps focused on the implementation of the Resilient Learner program. And so this slide shows us some of our mid-year data around the impact or the number of students that were involved in that program. So if you remember, we have a resilient learner teacher at each of our elementary schools that is new this year, and then we've had one at the middle school for several years. So looking at trying to figure out a way to show some impact of that program on our system and on our system, our tiered system of supports for our students. So we can see in that chart, 24 students across the 3 elementary schools received Tier 3 intervention. Now, this didn't happen. Those interventions were not systematic before. They might have been kind of one-offs, but having 24 students receive a Tier 3 SEL intervention is really incredible. 47 students received Tier 2 SEL intervention by our resilient learner teachers. And then there's some other data there too that we're trying to figure out some different ways to quantify impact. So it gives you some more specific data, but then one of the other action steps that I'll talk about in a little bit is that we had our behavior interventionist or our behavior coach meet with our resilient learner teachers every month. And so what we're trying to do is develop the program, implement it, but also measure impact, and to try to keep the program consistent as much as possible across the buildings so that the resources are available to all students, not dependent on where they go to school. And so those bulleted areas there is the work of that team coming together monthly and really looking at how do we share strategies, how do we share resources, how do we problem solve different situations together, how are we measuring impact. And so those will continue. Again, this is mid-year information, but those meetings will continue and the data collection will continue and refine so that we can really be able to say this is impactful programming for our students and it's making a difference. Okay. The next slide addresses, again, like Fame mentioned, that 100% of our students identified as high risk on our SEL screener. So SABRS is our social emotional learning screener for the district, that they will be matched with supportive resources. So what I really want to point out in this slide is really that I think the graph shows the health of our system. So in most tiered systems of intervention, typically you look for about 80% of your students meeting or exceeding whatever it is, whether it's academic, whether it's social emotional. You look at about 15% of your students maybe in that at-risk, kind of moderate at risk, and you look at about 5% of your students like really, really needing that intensive support. So when you look at, this is our fall data for our SABRS, shows 82% of our students fell in the low risk, 16% of our students in the some risk, and only 3% of our students, which equated to 62 students, fell in the high risk range. So then our obligation and our goal is that at every building through the problem solving teams, those students we make sure are matched up with the resources they need. This screener looks at academic, emotional, and social. So there's 3 different areas that either teachers at the younger grades rate each student, or the students themselves rate themselves in the older grades. So the interventions sometimes, so if you think about if in the academic area, if their score is lower in the academic area, maybe the problem-solving team looks at an academic intervention. Even though this is a social emotional screener, it's how they're feeling about how they are academically as a student. And so that those scores on the screener might indicate that the academic intervention may impact their social emotional learning, not always a social intervention or a behavioral intervention. Does that make sense? So then the next slide are action steps around these areas. Like I mentioned, the Resilient Learner Program was a lot of the work that went into the first semester was implementing that program. Behaviors, like I mentioned too, behavior specialists meeting with the Resilient Learner interventionists, really beginning to articulate our district equitable, measurable, equitable multi-level system of supports as it applies to SEL. And then rolling out our universal SEL curriculum. If you remember last year, we piloted 2 different curriculums. This year, we decided there was benefit to doing both. And so at the pre-K through 8 grade levels, the universal is being provided across the board. One thing I wanted to mention about the goal of I forgot to mention about identifying the support and matching students up with the resources. We really have already met this goal at every one of our buildings through our problem-solving teams. When this screener is done and the problem-solving teams get together, it's really hardwired at each building that this process happens, that the students who are, even a lot of the students that fall in that some risk range, but definitely the ones that fall in that high risk range, are connected with the supports that they need. So that's a celebration too, that's hardwired into our system across the district. Okay. To look at our action steps for second semester, like I mentioned, further developing that process of how to measure the impact of the Resilient Learner Program. The second action step, which we've already started working on, is that we do have some students that the Resilient Learner Program or our special education programming doesn't always meet. And so there's a group of us that are already meeting. We've already met quite a few times, and we are going to look at developing an alternative special education elementary program starting in the 25-26 school year. It's ambitious to start a program. We've got a lot of key pieces that we already know we need to do. Now we just need to really work at what does it look like, just so many different factors that go into that. And then finishing the articulation of our EMLSS as it applies to SEL, and then also measuring implementation. So that's one thing that kind of comes after you have that intervention system in place. Is you got to constantly be looking at, is it working? Is it working? So the students that we're hooking up with the resources they need, are the resources making a difference? And circling back to make sure we're measuring that impact. Okay. Another goal in this area is increasing the percentage of students with under 10% of absences to 90%. So we want at least 90% of our students in school most of the time. Our goal, this again is just data. Our goal is 90%. As of December of 2024, we are at 87.77%. So getting to our goal, mid-year data. And then the next slide.
If I can add, through January, it actually went up to 88%.
I didn't look at it. Okay.
We just kind of crunched that, so.
Okay, good. And then another piece of this goal is about increasing the Life at School portion of the Student Experience Survey. The goal is to increase it across the district by 0.15. We don't have the data yet for this because we give that survey at the end of the school year, toward the end of the school year. So you can see there that 2025 is still to be determined. And then looking at our action steps that impacted our SEL and our attendance. Some of the things that we did this last semester is to look at expanding our system of care support for our 6th through 12th grade students. So System of Care program is a partnership that we have with La Crosse County that work with students who have attendance issues. So it's our partnership with some staff from the county that really look at how can we break down those barriers to attendance, specifically for our 6th through 12th graders. It's not for our elementary students, but it's for our older kids. And then a couple other things that we did, if you recall, we revised the attendance policy and communicated that revision to parents. And we really think that had an impact on attendance for some of our students. We shortened what we considered a tardy. So the amount of time that we used to kind of give grace to a student being late to school, we shored it up quite a bit, and interestingly, it's made a big difference for some of our students. So instead of missing like 90 minutes in the morning, we have it as a 20-minute. You're tardy if you get there before 20 minutes, and you're absent for half the day if you get there after that point. And that was enough motive for some families to be able to increase attendance so that they're not missing instruction, is really the intent of that. The one that's in yellow, we're still working at finalizing the process to determining barriers to attendance through a needs assessment. It's not that we don't have the needs assessment. What we sometimes don't have are the resources that we can hook them up with. We have different programs in our community. We have the community health worker through the United Way, through the hub through the United Way. We have our school social worker that works with families with attendance barriers. And sometimes those programs are at capacity. And so one of our action steps for our second semester is to really look at our community and see if we have other agencies or other supports that we aren't tapping into that might be able to help some of our families with some of those barriers. The one that's red, I think we kind of pretty quickly after we set that came to the conclusion that all of the work around really impacting the student experience survey happens at the buildings. Every one of our buildings has a goal around that, and that for us at the district level to try to impact that is really difficult, but also probably not something that we're focusing all of our attention on. And so that's really the building level impact. You'll notice in each of their presentations is green, because they've done student roundings, they've looked at that information, they've talked about how can we make improvements to our system at each building level. But from a district perspective, it was harder to come up with an action step. However, down below in the second semester action steps, what we do as an administrative team when we do rounding with all of our staff, we come together and we look at, are there themes? Are there opportunities for improvement, and are there some action steps that we can gather from our rounding conversations with staff? So I think it was actually Roger who suggested this, that why don't we do that from a district level with our students? So after the principals have had their rounding conversations with groups of students, pull all of that information together and have that conversation around the administrative table about what do we see as themes? Are there any opportunities we can improve upon, and what action steps might make that happen? So we put that down as another action step for second semester in that area. Any questions before we go on to the building level Pillar 1 report outs?
I have one. So kind of going back to the Sabres data.
Yeah.
Right, and I thought it was really interesting, the approach there was not just to identify, but then then the phrase I kind of wrote down was like inside the why. Like, why did you get identified? Like, do we need to do some other type of intervention, right? How often do we renorm, and do we look at, like, by taking that inside the why approach,
Yes.
like, that we've had, the intended impact, right?
So we do the screener twice a year. So for sure that happens after each benchmark assessment screener window. I'm going to let the building principals answer how often because we have such a strong problem-solving team process, any student who is on the radar is going to be talked about frequently. They meet every week. And so like the why around the intervention, if it's not working, they're back on the list, regardless of the screening data. The screener is just a flag.
Yep.
It's quick, but it gives good information for us to start that conversation about that student and what they might need. So, but then really the work comes after that. What are we doing, and then how are we sustaining that? But like I said, too, I think we've got a pretty good system when we show that our overall screener shows pretty healthy results from a system perspective. Most of our students we might have a lot of students who are getting intervention who are now in that no-risk area. We just don't know.
Yeah.
So,
And one shift we made this year, because previously we were giving it at the beginning of the year, responding, giving it at the end of the year in the last window, which doesn't give you very much time to respond. But we really have the ability to rescreen at any point, starting in the winter window all the way through spring. So I know our elementary through middle school is definitely like they're rescreening now, because they're like, we want to know and we want to be able to, and I believe the high school also is going to be rescreening earlier than we have in the past. And the way it's set up, it gives us that ability to do that. And I think, again, hungry for data, we want to see is what we're doing making a difference? And are there students who might need more support that weren't in that category at the beginning of the year?
And just let me mention too, sometimes, like, I brought the youth risk behavior survey to the board for approval for us to administer. That's an anonymous survey. The SABRE screener, we ask parents permission to administer it to students, and they are identified. The results are identified. So we can hone down into that individual student level to be able to make sure that we're monitoring the students just like we do academically in their social emotional growth too.
Thanks for that information. That's awesome. I just had just a comment then as well. Last spring, if I recall, a number of the administrators around the table came to us with like an impassioned ask for a tool, right, to deal with tardiness. And I remember we had some vigorous discussion about that, but that was really like intelligent, well thought out request. And I'm really glad that we took the step to do that. So thank you all.
Yes, thank you, I was going to say that as well. Going back to the EMLSS, and specifically the resilient learners, that I appreciate the follow-up and feedback from that because we haven't heard a lot since those positions were filled. So this data breakdown is good. This is, I want to clarify, this is across all three. So these numbers account all three elementary schools. And obviously with that focus then comes to the action step of the alternative special education program, or starting to explore that elementary level only.
Right now.
Do we have this kind of information from the middle school? Is that coming and I'm ahead of myself, or?
No, that's a good question. I think because it was more established at the middle school level, we didn't include it in the data for the first semester. As far as like impact from the teacher that's there, we can get that for sure. I'm trying to think whether it's disaggregated by that. This data does not include the middle school data.
Yeah,
But I think we have it. Yeah,
Well, and
'cause
I
she's
would-
definitely part of those meetings.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know, Jana or Ben, do you know?
And that was established prior to,
It was started in COVID.
yeah, so I'm
Yeah,
assuming
so-
there's some mentorship or guidance from that
Yes.
position.
Yes.
So it just would be.
She runs a lot of tier 3 interventions for behavior. I would say she has a systematic approach to that, and students are moving in and out because it's very skill-based as well. So when we're working on self-control, there's a group of students who need self-control support. When we're working on engagement, there's students that need engagement support. We have numbers of students that are impacted and times of day that they're impacted, whether it's during they might need a little bit more of a quiet setting during work time in math, or they might need to dedicate their whole topper time to a tier 3 intervention in self-control, engagement, respect, integrity, all of our behavior standards.
So they're moving in, and not to get too far into the weeds here, they're moving in and out of the tiered instruction based on assessment or based on teacher assessment?
Probably, it's more teacher assessment and success in the intervention.
Sure, okay.
And the whole goal of that whole program is to have those students spend more time in the regular classroom. So that's really what we're trying to impact, is keeping them in their regular classroom with their peers during instruction. Yeah.
I appreciate this layout of information because we have talked a lot. There's been a lot of emphasis on the last couple years, well, since COVID, I would say, about the need for something to kind of support that at the elementary. So I'm glad to see your heads nodding. That it's helpful. So
Yeah, and I think we can continue to figure out ways to show impact. It's hard to measure something that didn't happen.
oh, for sure, yeah.
But I think from your comment, Anne, I think we can add, maybe it's not add, but just make sure that we include the middle school data in that impact development.
Well, and hopefully over the long run then see the elementary having an impact on the
Yes.
middle school longitudinally.
Yep, for sure.
Thank you.
I had kind of the same thing as my colleagues, like, I had written down too, it's really neat to see that, with that policy update, to see the impact already, and for the impact to be successful, like, that's a huge win, so I also wanted to call that out. And then I was listening to what the discussion you were having and what Jana was saying, can you, and I apologize if I don't understand, can you please clarify what you mean by alternative special education elementary program? Like, what does that mean?
Sure. So they're not it's not the same groups of students. So the students that are typically served through our resilient learner program do not have special education needs. They've not been evaluated. You can see some data there that some of them may have been referred. But sometimes students go beyond that tier 3 regular education intervention and need special education. Then we have a whole system and continuum of supports through special education. There are some students that max that out and need something more than what we can offer in our current special education program. So what we're looking at is very small number of students who really our school environment might not be the right thing for them. Students that sometimes we rely on outside agencies to make placements of that don't have capacity for us right now. And so we started talking internally, what can we do as a district to meet the needs of these students internally? And there's lots of benefits to being able to do that, because then the transition back to their school, back to their classroom, back to their peers is so much easier rather than in a separate location.
I think that's awesome. Thank you for explaining that. Like,
Yeah.
you just want less disruption for them so they get what they need, but yet can get back in. That's
Yep.
perfect. Thank you so
Yep.
much.
Yeah, yep, you're welcome.
Easy question for me. So the 24 that received structured tier 3 intervention, the so what that I should take away is that those 24 would not have received that prior to the system the way that it is.
Correct.
That's striking, like at
Yeah.
the very elementary history major level. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And to see through the font, I feel like there's a battalion of people behind you, of educators, of people on these teams, folks writing student reading plans, all to make that Times New Roman font work. But 24 real children that had that level of intervention they would not have otherwise had is a tremendous celebration, because it is so deep and so wide. So I just want to make sure that landed the right way with me and I understood it the right way, because it is just striking once you see through that font. So.
Well, and the other data that's on there, the referred and qualified for special ed or referred and did not qualify for special ed, they are tied to each other. And I think without a solid system of interventions, especially at that tier 3 level, what we see is often the only resort is a special education referral. Even though if we can impact 24 students at a tier 3 regular ed level that can maybe deter or prevent them from having to be identified as having a disability. Not that we don't want to identify students if there truly is a disability, but maybe if we can prevent that, that's 24 more students that don't qualify for special education potentially.
Shape all sorts of things.
Yeah, all kinds of things. Yep, yep. Thank you. And I think the first, for the Pillar 1 for the elementary group is going to speak first, and Lish is going to cover, if you remember, our elementary schools have a lot of the common goals that are all tied to the district goals too, and so Lish is going to report out more as a group and then individually if needed, or when needed.
So you might remember that we had very streamlined goals across the elementary, especially for Pillar 1. There are really very few differences between our buildings in Pillar 1. So we won't spend a lot of time telling our building specifics because they're very similar. I will share a little bit about our literacy goals that we had across the 3 elementaries. So as you can see, the goal statements are very similar, almost identical. The differences are just the starting percentages that we had, which was based on where we started this fall on those measurements, and then also taking a look at where we ended up last year. We want to get to at least that or better than where we were last year. So FAME already shared a little bit with you some of those revisions that we made. So with STAR reading, we're just looking at 4th and 5th grade now instead of 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So you can see there where each of our buildings fell in the fall for our 4th and 5th graders, predicted to be in that meeting or advanced category on forward, and where we're looking at this winter. So we felt very positive about the growth that was made there from the fall to the winter, making progress towards the goals of us getting to that higher level of meeting and advanced. And then if we can talk about our kiddos that are in kindergarten through 3rd grade. So again, this was revised again as FAME shared. Our kindergarten through 3rd graders took the Ames Web Plus as their measurement this winter. So this is kind of like a new baseline for us instead of what we looked at in the fall with our STAR early literacy. So taking a look at where each of our buildings fell as far as the percentage of students who were in that 25th percentile or below, those are the students then that we wrote the personal reading plans for. And each of us are looking to decrease that by 5% between now and the spring Ames Web window, which is coming up in just about a month. So it's coming up quickly, but hoping for that 5%, at least 5% decrease there, and feeling really good about that. As FAME shared, our teachers who are working on those personal reading plans feeling like we're seeing a lot of positive progress. So if we take a look at our action steps, as FAME shared, we are implementing those reading plans for the students who are in that 25th percentile or below, and our collaborative teams continue to collaborate around those fall STAR data for our 4th and 5th graders, and then the Ames Web data for our K through 3. And then our collaborative teams continuing to use that Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle of inquiry to respond to student data. And if you recall, we've used that phrase a lot of times, but that can be looking at just a unit of study. So there's no defined amount of time for one of those cycles. Could be 2 weeks, could be 6 weeks, anywhere in between, but it's using all of those formative assessments along the way so that we can change up our instruction. So we felt that that had a positive impact, seeing the growth on our STAR data, and we also feel like those reading plans are already showing us that progress towards our goal of reducing that. So what we're going to continue in semester 2 is monitoring those personal reading plans in the kindergarten through 3rd grade. So taking a look at what interventions we're applying. Is there something that we need to add back into our tier 1? So one of our action steps is looking at, we recognize through our Ames Web, we don't practice oral reading fluency enough in our universal instruction. So we are finding ways to implement that already. So this is already almost a green one there for us for semester 2, because we've been working hard on that for about 6 weeks already. And then we're going to continue to analyze that winter STAR data for our older kids. And we're modeling a really similar type of thing to our personal reading plans, making sure that we have all those kids that are in that 25th percentile or below on STAR reading for the older kids, that they're matched up with supportive tier 2 or tier 3 interventions as well. And then again, continuing to use that PDSA cycle to respond to the student data. Questions about our literacy goals across the elementary?
Just a comment, like, obviously, everybody improved, some significantly. Kudos to Northern, but to see, that's pretty fantastic. So I hope you all feel pretty good about that. And jumping in, again, at the elementary specifically, the amount of work and adjustment and change and new assessment for Act 20 and reading plans and all that stuff, that's a lot. And then to do it again while you open up forward at the same time, that was good timing. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. So again, kudos for the hard work. I know you guys have been working on these pretty intensely, so impressive.
Yeah, our staff have, I know FAME already shared it, but our staff have really been amazing and just flexible and like, yeah, let's get this done. This is the right thing to do for kids, and very commendable.
Awesome.
Then taking a look at our target group, FAME already explained this really well, so I don't know that I need to explain anything else about that SGP. But again, we're just looking at, we want the kids who are not meeting the proficiency benchmark to grow more than what would be expected for them to grow within a year. Now, are we going to make it to all of them being there? That's a pretty ambitious goal, but we feel really good about the growth that we're making there and knowing that we're taking a look at those kids who are in that below average growth, and we're figuring out what is the reason for why they're not growing. So that's really a big piece of those plans that we're making for our students, is if they're not growing as fast as we would like them to, then what can we do to change that? But we feel really good about the movement that we have of the kids going out of that lower than average growth to the average or higher than average growth. So as far as our action steps, we worked on individually tracking those student SGPs this fall, winter, and spring, and for each of them, whatever interventions we have, tracking the effectiveness of it, and not being afraid of changing it if it's not working. So I know you've asked a couple of questions about either our academics or our SABRs. How often are we looking at this? Our problem-solving teams meet weekly, and I think the longest we go without checking in on someone is 4 weeks. So we're taking a look at how they're doing at least every month and seeing what do we need to do differently if they're not making the progress that we expect. The reason why we color-coded this impact yellow is kind of like what FAME shared. Are we going to get everybody to 100%? It doesn't look like it right now, but we're sure going to keep on trying. So the things we're doing are helping. We're just not sure if that is super attainable to get all of our kids there at this point in time. But we're going to continue doing the things that we've been doing semester one because we feel like it's going in the right direction for our kids. Questions about our target group?
Just a quick clarifying question.
Sure.
If you go back to the slide before, the 66 SGP, is that an aggregate adding reading and math together?
No, so we have it separate for reading and separate for math. But there are some kids that kind of cross over. They're in the target group for reading and for math. So when we're taking a look at those plans for kids, we're looking at how's their reading doing and how's their math doing if they're in that
Right.
target group for both. Yep. And some of them too, we're able to see where they land in that bottom quartile, and you know, the kids that are right there on the edge. That looks a little bit different for kids than if they're closer to the bottom. What are we doing to get them that higher growth? They might be real close already, so their plans look a little different. All right, I'm going to hand it over to
yeah.
Mr. Sainer then for math.
All right. So cascading from our district goals around math and increasing our proficiency or students in the meeting and advanced categories on forward, you can see our goals for that and the progress that we have made so far toward those goals. So definitely some celebrations involved in that. And I might add the STAR math data meetings that Abby referred to were just an excellent example, I think, of the hunger for data that our teachers have. It was time that they used to gain efficacy in what they were doing, which is extremely powerful. So we want to keep going with that, and thanks to Lori for getting data together for us and diving into that. But our action steps around our math goals, you can see we made some progress in those, but most of it did center around our work with Shannon Keebler, as mentioned. And so we were perhaps a little off the mark in terms of where that was heading, in terms of the first action step around proficiency criteria and essential standards. We're really focusing more, as you can see, at that the first action step in semester 2, which I think is where our impact came, was from implementing the core structures, daily practice, and math talk. I think that really had an amazing impact. And so we will definitely proceed with that action step, as well as the development and implementation of math interventions and tiered response. Even within those STAR math data meetings, we began that process of figuring out what is the next level of intervention for students. So those are our two action steps as you move forward in math. If you have any questions about that. All right, and then our next goal around Sabres, which we've had extensive conversation about, but I think it is a huge celebration and a reflection of our teams and our systems in making sure that students are getting what they need, and Sabres is a way for us to make sure that we're staying on top of that. So you can see our action step and our impact, and then our next action steps. Last year we did the second Sabres in spring, which we figured out didn't make a whole lot of sense to us if we're going to respond to it. So we moved that up. Everybody already has done that in the winter already. And then our problem-solving teams will continue to use all of this data and continue to check in on how students are progressing. So those are our semester 2 action steps around Sabres.
All right, I will take the last two around attendance and then life at school. So you can see that each building has a goal to improve student attendance, specifically decreasing the percentage of students who are chronically absent. And across our buildings, we've been proactive with identifying students and families who need more targeted communication and supports for attendance. So if we go to the next slide, we can talk through some of that in terms of action steps for first and second semester. We found that one of the most impactful things would be to monitor attendance and also bring that to our problem-solving teams, but also identify families who are in need of more support and communication. So just really, we're very proactive in the first semester of getting that clear communication out there around the importance of school attendance and negative consequences of missing school as well. We do include information in back-to-school notices, conferences, and then attendance meetings to really emphasize how attendance does impact student learning. We kind of spoke to this earlier. The change to our attendance policy around what constitutes a tardy versus an absence has really highlighted that importance for our families too, and so we've noticed that that's had a great impact on student attendance. Then as far as our action steps moving forward, continuing to problem solve and work to eliminate barriers for students and families to get them to school is a great effort at each of our buildings, and we'll continue to do that as we move into the second semester. Any questions around attendance? Okay. Then the last goal area would be around that life at school survey, and each building does have a goal to increase that. And we do that through student rounding. So if you look at the next slide around action steps and impact, each of our buildings does incorporate student rounding to increase that score. And then the aim is just to have those ongoing conversations with students to better understand their perspective and then address questions and concerns. So it does look a little bit different at each building, but I think that speaks to the personality of each building and the students within the walls. So we've had discussions around what kids like about school, adults who care about them, feeling safe at school, participating in class, expected behaviors, and then also what they think can be improved. Then we took those themes and shared those out with students and staff to make an impact on just the feedback that they've provided. So we'll continue to do that, specifically focusing on those areas that present within each of our buildings.
Thank you.
All right. So for the middle school, we start off with our ELA achievement, again, similar to what has been shared with everything else. Our major focus for ELA this year has been on the piloting of the new curriculum and curriculums, and that will continue to be our major focus moving forward. You can see the impact there. Moderate growth, trending towards being close to the end of the year goal is the hope. I just want to highlight a couple of the sub pieces, because when we say implementing the pilot, like, it's very vague, it's very broad, and so there's a lot of things that go into that, and it's logistical things such as getting used to the curricular resources and how are we lesson planning and what is the sequence, but it's also there's a lot more nuanced and very teacher-centric skill things that go into that, including how are we doing grading, because it doesn't line up to how we did that in the past. And so how are we making sure that we're accurately assessing students, providing timely feedback? How do we make sure that this new curriculum, as it's laid out, hits all the same power standards, those most important skills that we've identified previously, and that we had our previous curriculum set up to do that. And so when we say implement the new pilot, it's not just, show up and yesterday we were on page 47, today we're on page 48 of the teacher book. There's so much more that goes into that. And so our ELA teachers have been really put to the test, and they're doing their absolute best to not only do the best they can for kids each and every day, but also thoroughly evaluate all these different resources in terms of what's going to be the best for students long term. And so that is our singular focus for ELA in terms of the strategic plan.
I appreciate you explaining that, what is the pilot, I appreciate you explaining
Thank you.
that.
For the area of math then, so our action steps are yellow because we have been able to do these things on some of the teams, but not all of our teams yet. And so we actually, last week, Lori Peterson and I started doing our walkthroughs, fidelity walkthroughs. And what that means is there's about 20 things in two different categories. One is the physical setup of structure of the room. The other is the large group instructional practices. And so we're going through there. And this is work that has been going on the last 2 years. This is the third year that we've been doing these at the middle school. And so these are the research-based strategies that we know lead to growth and gains and outcomes for students. And so part of it is going through and making sure that those things are happening. And sometimes it's as simple as, do you have the learning targets for the day posted somewhere? Are you referring back to them? All the way down to when you're asking questions, what types is it open-ended? Is it closed-ended? Is it a mixture of both? Things of that nature. And so that's been really good to go through. And I've learned a lot going with Lori, and because after we'll go through a classroom, we'll sit down and we'll calibrate, well, what did you see? What did you have for this one? And so on and so forth. And so then when we get done with those in the next few weeks here, we'll circle back with our math team. And typically in the past, we've only done this once a year. That's what they've done the last 2 years, is do these walkthroughs at the end of the year. But similar to how we want to provide better feedback to our students, we want to provide better feedback to our teachers. And so as a math team, we decided this year we were going to do it twice, once in the middle of the year, and that is not going to be the data that we keep. That's more of a formative, and then we're going to peel it back and process it, and then we're going to do it again at the end of the year, and that's the one that we're going to compare to the last 2 years when we've done that as well. So just making sure that we're providing high-quality feedback to our staff, just like we ask our staff to do to our students. You can see pretty good growth from fall to winter there in terms of math on the specific data and numbers there. But another thing that we are working on is with our math interventions as well as our math acceleration. So just a brief update on that there. With the interventions, we've been through a big process in the last few years of going from, assigning students to a topper time with not a ton of rhyme or reason to using STAR to assign students, and now we are getting even more specific and targeted in terms of specific skills that we're focused on for the upcoming unit or chapter, and just having it be not only more targeted but more free-flowing. And so that's a process we've been going through with our topper time. Like we've mentioned a few times this year, is continuing to refine what does that look like and how can we make it more prescriptive and more timely in terms of the intervention piece. Likewise, in terms of the math acceleration piece, we've had a number of conversations this year, both as a staff at the middle school as well as across levels with the high school, just talking about the feeling like, looking back at the data, we might be missing on an opportunity to challenge and accelerate more students than we have been the last few years. And so we think we've identified a few tweaks that we can make to our course offerings into that process and what that looks like, making sure, of course, that there's proper on and off ramps for if a student is accelerated but then starts to struggle, making sure that we have proper supports in place, as opposed to, in addition to that, the opposite would be that if a student wasn't accelerated but now they show a huge growth and they're just really knocking it out of the park, making sure that they're not stuck on a certain trajectory and that there's options to just really maximize every kid's math potential. And so I think we're close to having some tweaks for next year that are going to really help with that. In terms of the SGP and the growth, We have seen some pretty good growth. Again, nowhere near 100%, but as we've said before, that is a pretty lofty goal. And so to have 41% in ELA and 36% of students making significant gap closing, not clothing, growth is good numbers, and it's going in the right direction. Yeah, we want that. Yes. Thank you, Liz. So again, a lot of the action here has been using those target groups to better align our topper time interventions. And a next step that we feel we're going to really make good growth with layering on this spring is to create more of a monitoring system. And specifically what we want to do is we want to cross-reference. And so the students who are in our target group in ELA, how do they compare to the target group in math? How much overlap is there or not? And then also, as Jano mentioned a moment, with our students that are the chronic absentees, layer that in, as well as the students in our resilient learner, just all of those supports, layer all that in. And then in cross-referencing all of that, hopefully be able to see where are the students that maybe falling through the cracks, and that they may be identified multiple times here, but maybe there isn't a ton of support in place and maybe we missed something. So just a cross-referencing of all of those different pieces and laying that out with a specific emphasis on the target groups as well as the absenteeism for second semester will hopefully help us identify if we're missing anybody. Hopefully we're not, but if we are, then we can get something in place. For our Sabres, as you've heard, the goal switched to making sure that 100% of our students are matched with supports. And so for our first round of Sabres for the year, 100% of students are matched with supports. Shout out to our school counselors and student services team. They do a great job supporting our students in all the many ways that they need support. And in processing this, though, with our guiding coalition, we realized two opportunities for improvement that we're going to focus on second semester with our system here. We recognized that there were some students who were absent on the day that we gave this survey, and we didn't have a plan, we realized after the fact, to make sure that every single student took the survey. And so 100% of those who took the survey matched up with supports is great, but there's a possibility that we missed a couple because they were gone on the day that we took the survey. And so when we take that again here in a little bit, second semester, making sure that we have a plan to make that up so that every kid takes the survey so we're not missing anything. Additionally, matching up supports is great, but how do we know that those supports were effective, right? Keeping in mind that some of the reason why they may have flagged as high risk in the first place is to some extent out of our control. At the same time, could we develop a system so that when we match them up with supports, we're checking in on them more frequently? How are they doing? Maybe it's working and it's great, and maybe things are still tough and we need to look at additional or other supports as well. And so those are a couple opportunities for improvement that our guiding coalition identified specific to this particular goal.
To talk about absenteeism, we're looking at, we do have a system that regularly identifies students that are absent 10% or more, and we are communicating with parents. What we're wanting to do beyond that is looking at a system that identifies the target group, those who are 10% plus in absenteeism, high risk in Sabres, DNF list, STAR, from the below 10th percentile all the way to the 39th percentile. Looking at a cross-reference of all of those areas to see what students are flagging on multiple lines on that Excel spreadsheet, seeing if there's support that's given, and if there's not support that's given, and a student is chronically absent, that's a student that we really need to focus on, because once you get into a hole of missing work and late work and things like that, it's very hard to come out of that, and it's very easy to stay home another day because you already have a giant hole to dig out of. So that is kind of the subjective measure, but the objective measure is going to be looking at achievement, absenteeism, target group, and our DNF list in order to properly intervene especially a lot of our students have a lot of resources that we pour into them, but there's a group of students that we know that are probably in that 24th to 39th percentile that would be like blue on STAR, that may not have the resources that the students who are yellow and red may have, and really focusing on a group that you can move. And that's something that we're talking about. It's in process already, is what I should say. We already are looking at, we just have to fill in and process that and look at that at our TAPS team meeting. And then the next one is the Life at School survey. We looked at the growth mindset through our lessons in homeroom, universal tier 1 supports, and then clarifying and communicating to staff our procedures for reporting and responding to bullying. We also did that we took that one step further and also did that with students. We're completing rounding with groups of students, taking the same themes that we talked about with our staff from the Life at School survey, from the formative survey that we took. And then we're also starting a series of conversations in our staff meetings around belonging. First, we're going to talk about this upcoming staff meeting. What does it look like for a student to belong in your homeroom? And then the series will continue with classroom. We want to engage in a discussion on both like in classroom discipline, and then when we are doing discipline, whether it's out of the classroom or with an office managed discipline, like what does it look like to promote a sense of belonging as we're talking about that. And then the possibilities are endless for our staff series on belonging.
I really like that you identified that it's really hard to catch up when you miss school. And so that could be a deciding factor for some people, like, do I go back, do I not? And I appreciate that you identify that they are digging themselves out of a hole and trying to come up with a way to support them so they can feel like they catch up faster. So I appreciate that.
Maybe a few other thoughts on absenteeism, maybe for Jana or Lori or whatever. You know, I think there was a lot of concern about post-COVID, and I hate to keep going back to that, but absenteeism elevated post-COVID. Does that seem to be a factor currently?
So what I think we see a lot and what we hear a lot is a lot of school anxiety. And that is a spectrum of problems to solve, whether it's school anxiety, whether it's when you get behind, like what is causing that. And we're seeing a lot of students who are struggling to get into school on time, struggling to get to the next class, and what kind of ways can we solve that problem? What kind of plans can we have? We've utilized Lori, FAME, everybody to come around the table. We've had collaborative meetings with families that we share with the elementary school to see if that's like, I went to Irving Perch last week, and Abby and I met with a family where we have the siblings, and we're trying to just really kind of surround the family with support so that they don't have to have two meetings. It's one joint meeting, and we're just trying creative ways to get to that. I don't think I answered your question. I think we're still responding to post-COVID with a little bit of school anxiety. It's no longer like the health anxiety, but it might be more of like the 7:30 to 3:30, being there for 8 hours a day. We're still kind of responding to that.
Yeah, no, that's great, thanks. The other thought I had was talking about the change in our attendance policy, what's tardy and what's absent for a half a day, and your point about that. I don't recall that really as being a point of discussion when we were discussing it and deciding to change it, but that's a really interesting change that occurred.
And the impact that it has to maybe just motivate families a little bit more in the morning to get to school earlier.
That's great.
Just wanted to comment too on what Jana was saying. I still think, and you see this everywhere in the media, in education, in budgeting, the mental health needs of our students is still such a huge area that whether it's still a fallout from COVID or this is our new normal, that can impact attendance significantly. And so I know we've put a lot of efforts into meeting those mental health needs. And I like what middle school is doing and looking at, sometimes we look at one piece of data, but really you have to look at all of the pieces of data to really look at how is it going to impact a student's life. Yeah.
Jen, your point was really well taken. Lori, does it upstream? Will the things that we're doing with the resilient learners at the elementary school level perhaps lessen some of those effects downstream at the middle school?
I hope all, whether it's academic, whether it's social emotional, whether it's mental health supports, I mean, that's why we create the system to hopefully, earlier intervention too. And teaching them strategies and skills for lifelong to be able to overcome the anxieties or the things that come in their way for barriers. Yeah.
Well, and our governor has, I think, repeatedly addressed the mental health things very recently, including at the WASB convention in his speech there.
Yep. Yes.
I just want to say thank you for you guys getting together. I know that's probably extra work, like to coordinate between the two schools for that family, but that's really impressive that you went out of your way to like make that happen for them as opposed to needing to go to two separate meetings. So thank you.
All right, we'll jump in. Our first goal is about 92% of students passing all courses, and as I shared at the last meeting, we're at 94% for first semester. Two really key action steps were really making sure that study hall time wasn't what you might think of from a movie atmosphere or maybe from your own experiences in high school, but flat out if a student is struggling, that the study hall teacher knows what they're working on, directing what they should work on. I'm not just working on math, I'm working on 6.2, so there's a clear end, so on and so forth. So making that look for sheet for study halls and making sure that's very tight across study halls. And then also really focusing on, the admin counselor 3-week check-ins on where students are at, who's struggling. And that actually ties into one of our big action steps for this spring, which is to mimic that tightness of that with our case managers in alternative education and also in special education. So that ties right into the second semester step to continue improving learning for students. The second one, which again speaks to that student growth percentile for our students. What we looked at with that was looking at during our student practice ACT and pre-ACT in fall, looking for our students in that lowest quartile, what were they telling us that they needed, and then trying to build that into our systems. That also ties in very specifically in the next month now as we go into our junior ACT prep on the 25th and some other activities happening before March 11th. What did students tell us that they needed specifically in that group, and then trying to provide as much of that on a larger scale, and then some individual pieces. You have confidence groups in there. A couple of our students that are in that quartile told us, I don't believe I can do this even though my grades would show otherwise. I don't believe that. So looking at what does a confidence group look like with that group to help them do their best on March 11th, or looking further ahead, April 1st with our freshmen and sophomores. You've heard about the Sabres several times this evening. The reason we have this one as yellow is because we didn't know how to measure the impact specifically. We didn't have a test group that didn't receive services or supports, so how do you measure it? One of the pieces actually that Roger provided as an idea that we're going to look at with our guiding coalition, when we overlay our students that are high-risk attendance, our students that, if we start with the group that's high risk, do those students also fall into a high attendance group in terms of high absenteeism? Do they fall into a group of students that weren't successful in the classroom? And basically, what percentage of our high-risk kids are not in one or both of those groups? Kind of looking at that as a first measure of how successful those interventions were. So again, starting with our high-risk Sabres, looking at our high-risk attendance, are they also, what percentage of our high-risk kids are not part of that high attendance group? What percent of our high-risk Sabres are not part of that high-risk concern from an academic standpoint, to try to measure, are they successful, are they not successful, and if they're not successful, what do we need to I think I'd mentioned earlier too, from a CTE standpoint, looking at those industry recognized credentials, the key thing is that everything is in place for Sue Brewer in her infant and toddler class this semester to have everything in place for those students to work toward earning their assistant child care certification through the state of Wisconsin. It's a major win for those students. It's also a major win for area child care providers that need certified employees. We know that's a huge local area demand from a labor market standpoint. So the key thing is everything's in place for that. Sue and I will be meeting every other week, measuring, are we on track for that? Are there any barriers we weren't anticipating that we need to think about? And then another key piece of this, using our new communications director, Nick Ragnar, to publicize this so that area employers know that these students are available. And for those that want the experience, that we're producing them for them. We're also maintaining the certifications that we have in Microsoft Office, Adobe Photoshop, Inventor, and the other ones that were started last year. Jump to Charlie.
Yep, and as we look at attendance here, you see our goal was to have 87% of our students being here at least 90% of the school year. Last year, we ended at 84%. And as you see below, we're still kind of working through that as we look at our yellow. As you see our impact, we kind of started slow. There was a lot of sickness that started the school year, but got them back together. And with our data compared to last year, we're at 84 as of December of this year, which was higher than last year at this time. And as Fame had pointed out, January even increased it. So we're just at about 86. So we're real happy with where we're at, almost to 87 at our end goal. So hoping to maintain that with some of the things that we have mentioned there as far as removal of some privileges and continue to get that student voice on how we can help them attend school more regularly. And as you know, Lori mentioned throughout, you know, our TAPS team and our weekly meetings is a major driver of getting all kids to school. But again, matching resources with student needs just on a weekly basis is paramount in getting to that highest number we can get and hopefully surpass 87 by the end of the year.
That goal around belonging, Jason commented on, I think, at our last meeting, but a key piece of that is by adding the new engage time, which I can't emphasize enough. Rick Kite really helped our Guiding Coalition last summer, and then our whole staff at our September staff meeting understand the importance of social connections and how those social connections now in high school have major life outcome bearings as a 50-year-old thinking ahead. But Jason, I think, had mentioned that through the engage time, about 97 students that aren't otherwise involved in a co-curricular activity or a music ensemble had a consistent engage group that they were attending to push us to that 78%. So a key thing to get 90-some more students feeling that sense of belonging. The action step moving into second semester, we had surveyed students and staff at the end of first semester, and then Garrett Silker, who's done a fabulous job leading the engage throughout the first semester, is using that to help direct our team with the changes that we can make to capture more students that still don't have that connection, primarily juniors and seniors, going into the spring semester. The last goal is that composite life at school, and you've heard both me talk as well as Leah talk, our student rep, about the rounding that we've done. At this week's staff meeting, we're sharing out the quick wins and the action steps for our staff. The celebration with that, a lot of those are reminders about things that many of you are already doing and keep doing it because they have an impact per what our students are sharing. And then some action planning around the steps that aren't in place yet that students have indicated would improve their experience at OHS.
I have just a comment. It might not be even measurable, but I think the strategy that you have about structuring those study halls so there's like a look for sheet, it wouldn't surprise me at all if there's like trickle down to, making students feel like they're staying on top of things, to test scores improving. So I think that's great that you took initiative to take action on that. So
The nice thing was that came out of our alternative education program, because Darwin Greshner, Chris Abayam, that's exactly what they do at the start of every class period. And as they've learned, you don't say I'm working on math, I'm working on 6.2. Because working on math can look like progress when it's not.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jared or anyone?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, people might wonder why we just spent 90 minutes talking about stuff that you're talking about, right? You guys developed a strategic plan, and you came up with the idea of what's important. And as a board, the accountability piece to that strategic plan is to find out what's working and what's not working, right? Which you're doing now, mid-year, and again at the end of the year. So you can, understand what's going on in the schools and why, when you hear things like resilient learner and this stuff, you know what that is, right? You understand it. But the other piece is so that you understand when, the other question that you would ask is, so what do you need from us now, right? Because they can't do anything unless you provide it. And that's why this whole process is happening. And if you think about test scores, student learning equals test scores, right? How well we're learning and how well we're not learning. So all of this stuff ties together, and I mean, the last hour and a half was very, very important from a district perspective and from a board perspective, so that you can understand your accountability as a board. So thank you for the work that all you people did. I mean, lots of systems fitting together, and I haven't seen that, Roger, in when we were here. It wasn't like that. You guys have gone way more in depth as trying to figure out how things are working and why they're working and implementing them. So congratulations.
Exactly, Fran. That was excellent. It was great to hear every bit of it.
Well, and what I've noticed, because as we've worked through this, the presentation has been slightly tweaked, and this was clear, and the presentation was good, singularly focused on the goal, and so I personally liked having that presented that way also, so thank you.
I think we're getting better at working through the framework that we have in place, right? And that's evident in the discussion. And the one, just a reflection, I feel like at each level, we're starting to let the data, and it's correlating to other things that we need to be focused on, all centered around the strategy, right? So that's really neat to hear, thinking about how absenteeism can lead to maybe social, emotional deficiencies that want to keep me out of school, but then keep me from making progress. And so thinking about all those three pillars of that stool, right, then gives us an opportunity to focus on what each student individually needs, in order to progress. So it's really awesome to hear.
I think we share the sentiments. The only thing I would add, it's clear for 90 minutes that the folks in the room and the people you lead are running hard and running the race well. And I think none of the teachers would have a poor me attitude. I think it would always be, give me something I can't do. Like, I got this, give me something I can't do. So that's really commendable. So I'm thankful for all of you and taking care of each other. We spend a lot of time, of course, speaking about student outcomes, and a lot of these student plans, the reading plans, this hard work is borne on the shoulders of you and the folks you lead, so thank you for looking out for each other. The results we see, we know they come at a cost, but also probably they're very happily paid, and that's kind of a really neat thing too. So all the systems and all the things, absolutely, but man, that race is being run well, so thank you.
All right. We wanted to give the community, the group here, an update on our superintendent search. Fran and Roger are unwilling to stay, so we have, I just am throw that out there. We have hired a search firm through WASB, Wisconsin Association of School Boards, of which we're a member organization, to assist with our search. We've had a couple meetings already as a board. Leading up to that, a few weeks ago, reached out by connecting with various focus groups that included representation from all of our employee groups, students, families, Board of Education, and then in addition to that, we sent out a community survey that allowed the community, the purpose of the information gathering was to garner input on what qualifications and skills do we want to see in our next superintendent. On behalf of the board, I want to thank all of those who took the time to participate in our focus groups, those who took the time to fill out the community survey. All of the information was reviewed by the board. It was collated, combined to see what was overlapping. And we looked for themes in the information and then used that to create the candidate profile that is now included in the job posting. All of this information and the summary of all of that can be found on our district website. We have a link that's keeping community and folks updated on what we're doing. The position is posted and is currently accepting applications through the end of this current week. The board, next steps then, the board individually, we will review applications. We will have a meeting where we will then determine those individuals that we would interview in our first round of interviews, which are scheduled to take place end of this month. Those will be closed session meetings while those interviews occur. And then with final interviews looking to take place that first week in March. That schedule also can be found on the district website. We, of course, will take questions from folks if they have them, but right now it's just sort of walking through the process. And most information can be found on the website. So we're looking forward to seeing, hopefully, that I believe we're a district of choice for more than students. So, yeah, it's an exciting time. Change is okay. So, thank you all for your process. Thanks especially to Sonia, who is also doing a lot of work supporting our WASB consultant, supporting me as we walk through this process. Nick, who, a communications person, who's helping us with social media posts, etc. So it's an exciting time. All right, second Friday in January pupil count.
Twice a year, we do a student count. Third Friday in September, that determines the funding that we have for the upcoming year, and then the second Friday in January, which determines some aid that we get for operating the school district. There's 3 pages to the report that's attached in the board materials tonight. The first 2 pages are year over year looks at the third Friday in September and then the second Friday in January counts. Normally, districts usually see second Friday in January a little bit higher than the third Friday. It's just the way that it's traditional for our district and others. We didn't see that last year because of the school calendar, which had semester ending, and so we lost some of those students in January of 24 on that Friday count. But that was an anomaly because of school construction. We don't expect that to see that continuing in the future. Between the third Friday in September and this count, we are up 10 students. So that's kind of about normal. I'm hoping that we're going to be up this next fall. That's the real hope, to see our declining enrollment take a trend downward. Then the last page on this report, and these are enrollment counts. So remember the difference between enrollment and membership. Enrollment is a head count. That's the number of students that we're serving in our schools. And then membership takes that and translates it into an FTE. So what's different? What's different is these counts include our open enrollment in. So the students that are residing in a different district but are getting their education here, they do not include our open enrollment out. Those students who reside in our district but are choosing to get their education in another public school neighboring district or an online school. This last report will show you over time what is the enrollment in our buildings. So what's not included in this count would be early childhood, who are receiving the services basically at their sites, and then it also does not include our off-site 4K programs. Is there anything that, and you can see, I like this one just because I like to monitor what's happening to our enrollment over time from a building capacity issue and just monitoring over time. And then obviously we have our year over years too, which are the first 2 pages. So it's just an information item. No action is needed to be taken by the board.
Any questions for Jeannie? All right, our first action item tonight is small territory attachment, Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church. Janet is going to walk us through that request.
Yeah, so on an annual basis, a property owner can request to detach from the school district where their property is located and request to attach to a neighboring school district. We have in this particular item a bunch of information. We're getting a request for that has to be filed. You have to file a petition by February 1st. Shepherd of the Hills has filed that with Holman School District, the district that bisects the property that they have. And I'll have Travis bring up an aerial that you can get a better idea of where this property is located. You can see the north part. This is Highway 53, that's kind of got the line going through it, and then Sand Lake Road. You can see the Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church, and you can see the top part of that property is in the Holman School District. The bottom part is in the Onalaska Schools District. So they're literally in 2 school districts. Also in this attachment, you will see from the Shepherd of the Hills Church, the reason why they're asking to attach to our district. It needs to be acted on independently by both school districts. So tonight, the Holman School District is acting on it, and I've received word that they have passed it. But that shouldn't really impact your decision, but they have passed it. Both school districts have to pass. So normally what happens in the district that the property owner is seeking to detach from will deny it, because no school district wants to give up property tax base, because that means that those property taxes have to be distributed amongst all the other property owners in the school district. In addition to that, they don't want to give up enrollment. So usually the home district, I guess I'll call it that, votes to deny these. There are times when both school districts will accept it because it just makes sense, and then in this case, it just makes sense. My recommendation to the board is that we adopt or approve them to attach to the Onalaska School District. There is no property tax because it's a church. There are no students because it's a church, so there really isn't a gain for us, nor is it a loss for the school district. It allows them to have all of their property in one parcel and just makes it easier for them. Are there any questions that I can answer about process on this? Or any questions about the request itself?
Yeah, Janet, I think the request mentioned something about future expansion or some other things they want to do with that property, and this would make it easier for them to accomplish that.
It came about through the sign request, them wanting to do something with their sign, and their sign straddled a couple of property, or, straddled, so the city of Onalaska suggested that they move forward in this way.
I'll make a motion to approve the small territory attachment Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church to detach from the school district of Holman and attach to the school district of Onalaska as outlined in enclosure 17 territory and described to us by Janet.
And I guess the only thing that I would ask is that we can't approve them detaching, so we would ask our board to approve attachment to our school district, irrespective of what the Holman School District does.
So
I'll second Tracy's motion with the amendment of changing that from a detachment to an attachment to the school district of Onalaska.
Motion by Tracy, seconded by Aaron, to approve the petition request from Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church to attach to the school district of Onalaska as outlined in enclosure 17 and detailed by Janet. this evening. Okay. Is there any questions, additional comments? Can we have a roll call, Emily?
Tracy,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Anne.
Yes, that motion carries. Thank you. Board policies, Lori.
Yes. So we currently have 2 board policies that have the same name. And the name is non-discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs or activities. These policies are governed by the federal Title IX regulations. And one of the policies we've had in place since 2020, we revised it last summer because that policy governed any incidences that would need to be investigated prior to August 1st of 2024. That policy is policy 2266. Then we have a new policy that you passed August 1st or before August 1st that would be used to govern any incidences that happened after August 1st of 2024. That policy through the court system at the national level is no longer allowed. So what boards are being asked to do is rescind that newer policy, which is policy 2264. Numbers are confusing because they're backward. And then revise the policy 2266. Both of them are listed in the attachment. On page 17 is where the policy 2266 revisions are. And it's really just about taking out of that policy the references to the other policy. Does that make sense? So the recommendation is for the board to consider rescinding policy 2264, which is based on the 2024 regulations from our board policy, and then adopt the changes, the revisions in policy 2266 as highlighted in the enclosure.
Yeah, being on the policy committee, I mean, it didn't really require any conversation because that's what the federal government is telling us we need to do.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that line we had added was just for clarification's sake, like you said.
Yeah.
So.
And just for a clarifying question, typically with policy changes, we have a first reading and then come back a second time. I'm assuming that there's impetus to make the change because it's essentially required by law.
I believe so. Yeah, unless there's any input into it, but I don't think it's going to change the decision.
It's really not changing other than removing the
Agreed.
2024.
It certainly seems like it was not very long ago that we created this policy. But we knew that the legal process was happening and this could have been the result.
Yeah, there are some school districts who didn't adopt the 2024 policy, so now they don't have to do anything. But it's okay.
All right.
I would make the motion that we delete board policy 2264, non-discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs or activities, and revise board policy 2266 with the same name as explained by Lori and included in enclosure 18.
I'll second.
Motion by Mark, seconded by Eric to delete Board Policy 2264, non-discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs or activities, and revise Board Policy 2266 of the same title as outlined in enclosure 18 and detailed by Lori. Are there any additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those changes are approved. Thank you, Lori. Are there any requests to remove the item from the personnel report for separate consideration? All right, Sonia.
You know, this one was just added on Thursday, so up until that point, there was not going to be nothing.
I
on
don't
this
think
personnel
this is
report.
like, wow.
So we have a track coach to finish out.
I'll make a motion to approve the personnel report as presented by Sonia and detailed in enclosure 19.
Second.
Motion by Aaron, seconded by Tracy to approve the personnel report as detailed by Sonia and outlined in 19. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The personnel report is approved. Are there any requests to remove items from the consent agenda for separate consideration tonight?
Hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Aaron, seconded by Mark to approve the consent agenda as presented tonight. Are there any questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda is approved as presented. The board, go ahead. Oh, sorry. The Board of Education will entertain a motion to convene in closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, Parents 1AF and 118.125 of the Wisconsin statutes to evaluate and act on a student disciplinary matter. The board will take any action required in closed session. The board will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting at the conclusion of closed session.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by Aaron, seconded by Eric, to convene in closed session as detailed on the agenda and read by myself. Are there any questions? Will you do a roll call, please?
Aaron?
Yes.
Eric? Yes. Tracy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes. We will convene in closed session at, in about 5 minutes in the front conference room.
Something awesome.